So hello everyone, welcome to this week's YouTube tutorial. This week it's all about viewers. We're talking about viewing solutions for our technical content. That's because I've had a whole raft of questions in around this, and what I've done is I've grouped a whole load of questions together, and I'm going to go and do my best to answer them or tick off as many of them as I can as I work through this tutorial. For those of you who are new here, my name is Mike Ingledew, and I am all about the independent advice and guidance around integrated product support strategies, whether you're adopting technology or whether you're trying to look for a methodology for creating your content and support data. So this week we are talking very much viewers. As I said, I've had multiple questions in about this. So what we're going to do is we are going to try and tick off as many as we can. I've just called out 3 here, but I've had about 6 or 7 questions around viewers. But these are the kind of the most important ones. Can I look at the types of viewers? I'm going to talk about types very shortly. Some of you are looking for the IETP solutions in the S1000D market, and some of you just want to create tastier technical documentation for your product, and you need to know what the options are that are out there. Bearing in mind, not everybody is coming at this from an S1000D perspective. Some of us are just using structured languages in different ways. We don't all have to be using things like S1000D. So I'm going to show you some options here very shortly. So again, I've grouped as many of these together as I can to try and tick off as many as I can. So I want to talk about some viewing options that we have. So when I talk about viewing options, I'm talking about we are trying to just get our data out to some kind of modern technical publication viewing capability. And we have a number of different options available to us. We have open solutions, we have domain-specific solutions, and we have self-developed solutions. And I'm going to talk about each of these in turn. So I want to move first and foremost into open solutions. And why do I want to talk about open solutions? Because, as I've said before, S1000D is only one way that we can produce technical publications. There are a multitude of ways that we can use, create, and deploy our technical publications. So let's put S1000D to one side and let's think about other methodologies. Now, I'm going to talk today about 2 tools that I use, and I'm only going to talk about them briefly. I use Adobe RoboHelp and I use Madcap Flare. Both of these are tools that I have purchased. I am not being sponsored, endorsed, or anything by these guys. There are things I love about RoboHelp, and there are things that I love about Madcap Flare. There are things that I detest about both tools too, and I'm going to do some more tutorials on those. But those tools come with the ability for us to be able to publish our content in a flexible way. So last week I showed a screenshot of RoboHelp and how you can create structured information using snippets and those kind of things, that in the same way that you can use CIRs. So check out that tutorial from last week. But we can create highly engaging, flexible and functional content. So here is a desktop output from Adobe RoboHelp, and I created a technical publication in Adobe RoboHelp, used the export capabilities from RoboHelp, and I have managed to install very quickly an IETP solution on our local network here, and that local network URL I can point to from multiple devices. And I'm going to leave this one up for a little bit because I just want to put some annotations up here. You can see that these are all multiple devices and they are all pointing to exactly the same URL on our local network. And somebody has asked me about running IETP solutions off a NAS, a network access storage device. I'm going to do a tutorial on that, and I'm working with a couple of the software vendors that are domain specific to get theirs working on a local NAS and show you that. But outside of the S1000D environment, using tools like RoboHelp and Madcap Flare, and yes, there are some out there, I'm just talking about these are the tools that I use, and you can get highly engaging and functional deployments from one single output from a tool like RoboHelp or Flare. These are pointing to the same common URL, and you can see that the content is being displayed in an appropriate manner that's for that screen size. So table of contents are being hidden, tables themselves are being squeezed onto a screen size, and this will work also if I go into portrait, landscape, if I turn or decide to move the viewer around. So this gives us a highly functional output from a commercial off-the-shelf tool, in this case RoboHelp, but Flare does exactly the same. They have they call it multi-channel outputs from those tools. So that's one option that's available to us, especially if we are not coming to it from an S1000D perspective, but we just want to create functional and engaging technical content for our end users. Of course, we have S1000D specific viewers, and the S1000D specific viewers, we are obviously very focused on our domains, so the demographics of the aerospace, defense and space requirements. And we can still create those kind of content solutions from our RoboHelp or Madcap Flare, but of course we have specifications that are going on behind this. So the S1000D vendors develop specialist viewers to support the requirements of our domain. And I'm going to talk about some of those requirements shortly. We have deeper control over the content itself, and that's because it uses what's going on inside the S1000D specification and internalizes it within the IETP solution. And it focuses very, very specifically on what S1000D requires. Now, I'm not going to talk about any one specific viewer because they all do very slightly different things. Not all viewers support all components of S1000D. So it's important that you decide which viewer is right for you. And I'm going to give you some pointers on that very shortly. But if you're looking for a viewing solution, check out the link below because there are some software companies that support TDW that have some brilliant IETP solutions. So go check those out. So when we talk about the domain specific, I'm going to break this down a little bit more for you because I've had lots of questions around how we would select a viewing solution. So I'm going to break that down for you. Of course, we could do it ourselves. We could develop our own solution. And, that is something that I have seen happen, and I am seeing it happen right now. And my first question is why? Why, if you are using S1000D, why are you developing your own viewing solution that some of the software vendors out there have not actually heard of or actually tested and seen? It's much more cost effective. It reduces the risk if you are actually going to use a commercial off-the-shelf tool. I'm going to talk about bespoke authoring environments over the coming weeks and the risks that introduces to our project and to our organizations. And this kind of sits in there as well. So I always say, why? Why are you doing it when you can either A, go and find something off the shelf that does something like this in a very functional way, and we can still have desktop versions if we want desktop versions. We can get very highly functional content out using both domain-specific viewers as well as the non-S1000D. So when we talk about routes into our IETP solution, I'm going to give you some examples here of what it is that the kind of questions I would ask my customers and make sure that they are able to answer these questions. So we have to think about contracts. What is it we're actually being asked to deliver? Are we being asked to deliver an IETP solution? If so, then are we being mandated to use one? Another big risk and another big frustration area is the mandating of viewers. I get asked questions regularly on why is a specific viewer being mandated? And there are upsides and there are downsides to doing that for organizations. And I'm going to throw some grenades into the room on that over the next few weeks. So we have to also think about our source content. Which source formats and structures are we supporting? As I said, Not all S1000D viewers are created equal. Last week we talked about the CIRs. Are the CIRs supported? Are we going to be publishing CIRs? Is the process data module supported? Are we able to have and hide and show certain functionalities and features? I'm going to talk about a real life example of where an IETP solution was basically abused on a project that I was asked to support. What's our capability? Do we have the infrastructure and the skills to support an IETP solution? Are we going for something that we want to host internally, or are we going something that can go out on the cloud, or something slightly different? And what's our user needs and capability? This is a big challenge, because we are in the market right now where the demographic of user is changing. My era of engineer is coming towards the end of their working life. So we're familiar with working with paper-based technical publications. We're now moving into an era of engineers who are familiar with using interactive manuals and the way that they can navigate and use devices. I gave a presentation recently where I talked about a mobile device, and I said, when we look at a screen, the kids today are looking at a screen in different ways. They can see what's actually happening off the screen. They know if they swipe up and down, or if they swipe into the left or whatever, that there's other stuff is going to happen. This is kind of second nature to them. And, you know, I was involved in a conversation only this week with a smart guy that said, look, I'm being given this job of developing a technical publication strategy for our product. He says, but we have to be developing our technical publications for maintainers that have probably not even been born yet. And, you know, this is the reality of the length of some of our products in terms of lifespan, as well as you know, the user capabilities and the technological advancements that are going to happen over the coming years. And what does the future actually hold for us? I'm going to talk a little bit about that on my final slide here. But what is the future of our technical publication? I think I've mentioned it on YouTube multiple times. I always say to my customers, especially on the larger, longer life platforms that I support, let's have a strategy for our technological pit stops along the way. So we obviously have our product itself, which goes through all of these technological advancements and modification states and changes. We should have the same attitude with our technical publications. We should say, in 5 years' time, we're going to decide whether is S1000D still doing a job for us, or is there now a new alternative? Should we be looking at some more modern ways of deploying our information, as well as technological advancements? So we're going to talk about that in a slide or two. So when we talk about approaches to our viewing deployments, if you like, in the past we've talked a lot about classes and levels and you know, those kind of things of our, which all basically relate to features and functions and connectivity of our IETPs, our interactive manuals. Today, all of this interactive manual world has kind of collapsed into one discussion point, I believe. And that's thanks to the vendors out there that are driving the functions and features of what's possible. So in the past, we might have had a very rudimentary basic deployment that now, even that very basic deployment has some fantastic features and functionality that you would have only expected in a more high-end type viewer. So there are lots of different ways that we can look at this. So we have our ability to go out. So that comes up to my table that I showed you earlier on with all of my viewers on. I would load it up again, but one of the devices has gone to sleep. And so we have our ability to go out to multiple devices, as I showed you previously. So we have desktop, we have tablets, we have mobile devices and all that stuff. And we have multiple data sources. So I'm coming at this very specifically now from an S1000D perspective. So we can drive the actual content of our viewer from lots of different ways and sources. So we have what is known as an open viewer, as bespoke viewer, or a mobile app. And I'm going to do much more on mobile apps over the coming weeks. So let's break this down and let me tell you what I'm talking about here specifically. So we're sticking in the S1000D bucket now because I've showed you the other options. And, you know, we have in the past had lots of what is known as bespoke viewing solutions, which is that the software vendors, for whichever reasons, project reasons or technological reasons, have developed an installable that goes onto a machine, and that's the only way that you could view that S1000D content. There's lots of reasons why you would want to do that, and there's lots of reasons why you wouldn't want to do that. So that is what I'm calling a bespoke viewer. It requires an installer to be able to view that content, and that content could be coming from any of the multitude of sources that I just talked about there, whether it's a DVD, a pen drive, a database connection, or just a simple file system. An open viewer, on the other hand, is something that will still take your S1000D content but turn it into something that uses the native viewers that are installed on your local machines. So whether that's Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Edge is a new one that obviously many of the vendors now are starting to support. So therefore it's still giving you all of that S1000D functionality and capability, but what they're doing is they're encapsulating it inside these open viewers, which are much easier for us to install. They're much easier for us to get through corporate kind of authorizations, and we can get them through our IT authorizations to get onto our network and those kind of things. So we have the ability to either have a bespoke viewer, or we have something that will sit inside an open viewer, which is key. Now, mobile apps is something that, like I've said, I'm going to talk a little bit about over the coming weeks, because that viewer that I showed you on all of those devices, the desktop was still running. This viewer here, we actually managed to load it into an Android app, and it ran natively inside an Android app, and it worked absolutely perfectly. So I'm going to do some tutorials on that and show you how I did that and why we did that. So back to the slides, and we now obviously have what is known as cloud-based as well. We can have the ability to access all of our viewing content from a cloud. Now, a wise man once said to me, Mike, there's no such thing as a fluffy cloud, just somebody else's computer, which is true. But, you know, we are seeing now that lots of organizations are looking at how they can use this cloud-based data lake, data source, and access it from a viewing solution. So we can have local installs and we can have cloud-based driven data. So that's what this slide is essentially trying to show you. And, you know, so this is, I've tried to simplify this as much as I can, but essentially most of the viewers in our market today sit in one of these kind of streams. So we can see where the options are to us in terms of how we select and what we select. But where do we start is one of the questions that I get. Now, I've had to break this down from one of my consultancy packs, so I haven't included everything. So I always say start from the end. And what I mean by that is, where is it we're going? What are we trying to achieve? We know from a production perspective, we might want to integrate with the other S-series specifications or other logistics specifications or other procurements, databases, those kind of things. We know that, but where are we going with this data? So I say, let's start at the what is it that we need from our IETP, or essentially our interactive output. So what are our infrastructure limitations? I won't go through all of these in depth because I'm already over my 20 minutes. What are our data requirements? And, you know, we can talk about that on a future tutorial. What are the integrations, the output integrations? Are we going into ERP systems or maintenance management systems? And what are our security and encryption requirements. Encryption is increasingly becoming an issue for those of us that are going more and more to a cloud-based solution. What are our product needs? So underneath the enterprise, we have multiple products or multiple variants of products. So what data types beyond S1000D do we need to support? So we obviously are asking questions around, do we want to support process data modules? What's the kind of parts information interaction that we want? What's the parts ordering interaction that we want? Those kind of things. Is it possible? But do we want to integrate PDFs? Do we want to, as I've mentioned there at the bottom, are we going to be putting multimedia and interactivity of that multimedia into our viewer? Do we want to put 3D in there? Are we going to put video in there? Are we going to have audio files? All these kind of things. Which features of S1000D does it support and do we need? And what are our deployment needs? So when I talk to my customers, you know, we might have those that are quite happily sat in a hangar somewhere or in a dock somewhere where the viewer is only ever used when the product comes into that servicing bay. So it's easy for us to install on the hardware that I've showed you today already. But what happens if we have to send data down a very small internet pipe to somebody who might be in the middle of the Ulu somewhere, that they need to access that data quickly and easily? How do we maintain it? How do we update it? How do we ensure the user has all of the up-to-date and current information? So what are our user and demographic requirements? So skills and usability of the IETP. You know, are we talking about guys that have grown up with the old way or the old-fashioned way of accessing technical publications? You know, what is our user demographic? Do we have older, younger, those that are more susceptible to adopting the technological advancements that we want to give them? What's their desire to help us actually improve what we're giving to them? I talked about ROI a couple of weeks ago. And do we have that user community buy-in? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that on my last little silo here. Focus on the features that we must have. Focus on the features that are nice to have. And S1000D does give us a functionality matrix. My opinion is it's a good starting point. It doesn't mention hardly any of the stuff that I've given you on this slide. And, you know, we need to look beyond that functionality matrix. We use it on my consultancy tasks as a starting block. And then we have our own functionality matrix that we say, right now, let's talk about these realities. My view is that the S1000D specification needs a little bit of modernization around viewer guidance and deployments of IETPs. But the S1000D matrix is a reasonable starting block, but it's not the only place that you should be looking at when it comes to selecting or deciding what you want from your viewer. And I'm going to talk about future developments very shortly. This ties in nicely to demographic, and it ties into what our user expectations are when it comes to technical publications. And what are the options that are out there? There are multiple options out there. We take all of these requirements, we take all of this input, and we go and compare. What's the technology stack that's being used? So what's being shown to you in a lovely demo in a nice warm office somewhere? What technology is going on behind that? Is it future-proof? Can we maintain it? Let me give you a great example. A few years ago, Microsoft decided to make some serious security changes to Internet Explorer. Overnight, it absolutely shut down dead a number of the S1000D viewing solutions out there. And a number of viewers were disabled because Microsoft had decided to turn off some of the capability that was standard inside Internet Explorer. We're going back a long time now, and the viewing community, the vendor community, had to work frantically to actually get them to work again. So I remember, because I was in the middle of a lot of discussions there, what's the third-party reliance? Do we have to have third-party graphic viewing engines? Have we got some other publishing engines going on behind that? Therefore, that might have the final and the important part here, the commercial implications of our IETP solution in terms of licensing, in terms of cost, in terms of deployment permissions. And then test and adjust. I always say go beyond the bike. That's because most vendors will show you the bike data. Why? Because that's what we have in the community. I like the software vendors, check out the ones down below, that will take your data, they will load it into an IETP solution, and they will say, here it is, here's a demo, have a play, see what you think. That's the kind of vendor that I think you should be wanting to work with. And I know that all of the guys that support the work that we do here at TDW will actually do that for you. So check out any of those down there. Then go back to the user community and put it in front of them and get them to play with it and break it and see if they like it, they loathe it, or if they've got suggestions. I was involved on a project recently where they did exactly that, and the user community came up with some fantastic suggestions on how the IETP should actually be improved to make their working environment that little bit more productive, and test the processes as well. And what I mean by that is, if we deploy it, how can we maintain it? How can we update it? How can we ensure that we get out those emergency service bulletins or any kind of temporary amendments, those kind of things? How do we get them out there? I have seen projects where they have invested in interactive manuals and then decided that it's not something that they can maintain for deployment reasons because they didn't check out all that infrastructure stuff at the front end. They didn't make sure that they could actually manage the processes of updating and maintaining that technical publication. So these are kind of, and I've only given you some of the things in these buckets that I say that we should go through on my consultancy tasks, but this gives you enough to get going and to be able to come up with a reasonable decision or thought processes on where you should be going. But of course, the viewing market, the viewing technology that we see today is actually nothing innovative. It's been around for a very long time. We've been deploying to mobile devices for a very long time. You know, people have been putting stuff onto Surface Pros for a long time, putting stuff into the cloud for a long time. So where are we going? Well, of course, we're now going to look a little bit more about immersive technology. So this illustration down in the bottom left-hand corner is nothing more than a reduced scale of what I showed you on a previous slide. But we are now going out to things like augmented reality, and that is going to be the next generation of viewing solutions. And we're already seeing the improvement on the capabilities of this. So here we've got a mock-up of where we can now drive that content from a data source, and yes, we could go out to the cloud if we wanted to, and we can display content inside a in this case a HoloLens or something else, that some kind of smart device. Now this is a good segue for me to talk about. We're going to be talking about this specifically at the Spring Innovation in Integrated Product Support event that we are delivering early April, free of charge to the entire community. Check out the link below. You can go and join that completely free of charge. And I'm going to be presenting on behalf of a company the connected augmented reality environment, taking data from a CSDB or from a data source and presenting it to an end user based on triggers that the HoloLens itself may actually see. So this is where our technical publications is going. I get asked a lot about the augmented reality environment, and that leads me nicely into my final thoughts. So my final thoughts are, there are ways that we can create technical publications today that if you're not from an S1000D environment, you can create very highly engaging, deployable technical publications in a way for a very, very small fee. You know, you can go and check out how much all of those flares and that kind of stuff costs. The S1000D viewer market is not saturated, but it has a lot of highly competitive and functional viewers that are out there, and some of them are absolutely brilliant in the way that they work. The functionality is absolutely awesome in some of them. Remember, not all of them will support every aspect of S1000D. Not all of them will support your exact requirements. So you have to do the trade-offs. I said I was going to give you an example of a feature that that was abused by an IETP solution. I was asked to go into an organization. It was a road vehicle, and I went in to train the user community on the use of an IETP tool that they had selected, and in there was a feature that allowed the user could upload files, so that in theory, when it was the product was designed, it was to allow the for the benefit of all to upload photos, to upload temporary amendments, that kind of stuff. But it was quickly identified that the user community was uploading many other things that they shouldn't have been uploading, so they had to disable that upload capability, and they had to assign it only to certain individuals. So you have to decide what works for you and for your organization. The viewing market is very well developed, certainly in the S1000D world, and the future of our technical publications is changing. I'm asked a lot about augmented reality. In my view, it's just another viewing capability. We are moving away from that either bespoke viewing or that browser-based viewing solution that I showed you on my slides. That augmented reality is just another methodology of taking that content that we've created and presenting it in a slightly different technological way. These things are changing. They're changing all the time. I've seen some very interesting developments with organizations like Safran, and there's some stuff on YouTube that you can go and have a look at what organizations like Boeing are doing, really driving how they can use things like augmented reality and the traditional technical publication content. When we're talking traditional now, we're talking IETPs, right? So that's it. Hopefully that gave you, I'm well over 20 minutes this week, and hopefully you stuck to the end. And if you are interested in joining our Spring Innovation and Integrated Product Support event, link below, check it out. Do come along. Be good to have you along. And until next week, can't remember what we're talking about next week, but I'm sure that you will enjoy it. Like it, thumbs up. Don't like it, just tell me. And yeah, till next week. Speak soon. Stay safe.